If slow, emotional love stories about broken people finding their worth touch your heart, stay with this video till the end. And if you feel something stir inside you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories we create together. The winter wind clawed at the gaps in Noelle Tran's coat as she stood outside the restaurant, staring at her reflection in the glass. On the other side of that glass, New York glittered in crystal and chrome. Warm light, soft jazz, men in tailored suits raising wine glasses, women in dresses that looked too delicate for the cold. On her side, the wind dragged the smell of exhaust and snowmelt up from the street. Her boots were scuffed, the soles gone thin, the sleeves of her thrifted coat frayed at the cuffs. The cheap lipstick she had borrowed from another woman at the shelter tasted faintly of wax. She checked the name again, glowing on the screen of the old phone someone had donated. Harper & Co., Midtown. This was the right address. This was the right time. A blind date, her friend at the women's shelter had said, grinning. He seems nice. At least let yourself have a decent meal once in your life. Noelle. Inside, a host in a black suit glanced toward her, his expression polite but guarded, as if he weren't sure whether she had business being here at all. Noelle swallowed. Old memories pushed up, unwanted. Her mother's hand slipping out of hers in the hospital bed. Her father's figure retreating down the hallway of their old apartment, shoulders slumped, the scent of cheap whiskey clinging to the air. The look on her roommate's face the year before, when Noelle had sold her laptop and the last pieces of jewelry her mother left her to pay that girl's rent. The empty room afterward, the unanswered calls, the landlord's notice, the slow slide into the shelter, into nights on trains, into the knowledge that when people said you don't look homeless, what they meant was, you still look like someone we might not be cruel to. Yet, she could still back away, walk 3 blocks, get on the subway, ride until the warmth lulled her to sleep. Inside, a couple laughed at something the waiter said. Glass caught the light and scattered it like snow. Noelle pulled in a breath that scraped her throat on the way down and pushed open the door. Warmth hit her first, then the smell of garlic and butter and grilled meat. The host looked up, professional smile snapping into place, then flickered slightly when he took in her coat. "Good evening," he said. "Do you have a reservation?" She tightened her fingers around the strap of her bag. "I'm meeting someone, a blind date." The name should be under. She glanced at the phone again. Eli Harper. He paused. He's tapped. For a second, something uncertain passed over his face, like he half expected not to find anything and send her away. Then he straightened. Yes, of course. Right this way. She followed him through the forest of tables, feeling eyes skimming over her like cold fingers. The clink of cutlery seemed to fall silent as she walked past. Or maybe that was just inside her head. At a corner table by the window, a man rose to his feet. He looked younger than she'd expected from his profile picture. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair pushed back carelessly. Sleeves rolled up just enough to show that the shirt he wore was expensive without trying. The city lights painted lines of silver along his jaw. When he saw her, he didn't hesitate. No flicker of confusion, no almost undetectable wince. He smiled. Not the perfect, polished smile she'd seen in other men who wanted credit for being kind. Something a little softer. Not practiced, exactly. Tired around the edges, but real. "Noelle?" he asked. She nodded, throat suddenly too tight. "I'm Eli, he said. "I'm glad you came." He pulled out her chair. The host melted away. The restaurant returned to its slow conversation and background music, but the world around their table felt held in a different kind of quiet. Noelle sat, trying to find where to put her hands, her bag, her eyes. She set the bag at her feet and folded her hands on her lap so he wouldn't see them shake. A waiter approached. Eli glanced at the wine list, then closed it. "Let's start simple," he said. "Soup of the day, and the roasted chicken for both of us. If that's okay." He looked to her, as if she were the one deciding whether this was acceptable. "Sure," she murmured. It was easier than the panic of reading prices she didn't want to see. When the waiter left, the waiter left, Eli leaned back, as though giving her more space. "So," he said lightly, "how was your day?" It was such a small question, but for a second she almost laughed. How do you tell a man who eats in places like this that your day was fluorescent hospital corridors and waiting rooms, a part-time job changing bedpans at a nursing home, the smell of antiseptic laced with underfunded sadness? She chose a softer version. "Busy," she said. "I help out at a care facility and at a shelter. Sometimes." "That sounds intense," he said. "In a good way, but still intense." She shrugged. "Someone has to do it." He watched her for a moment, as if she'd said more than she meant to. "I've always admired people who can do that kind of work," he said quietly. "Stay close to the hard parts of life and not run." The words pricked at her, small and sharp. If you admired them so much, you wouldn't let them end up sleeping on trains, a part of her thought automatically. But another part, a quieter part, noticed something in his tone, something that sounded a little like guilt. She pushed that thought away. Rich men could feel guilty about many things. The world still worked the way it did. "Anyway," but he said, as if aware he was treading close to something, "this soup smells amazing. I was half afraid they'd try to impress you with a 16-course tasting menu." "Why would that be bad?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Because then we'd spend 2 hours talking about which foam pairs with which root vegetable," he said, a smile tugging at his mouth. "I'd rather talk about, I don't know, the last song that made you feel something." She blinked. That wasn't a question she'd expected. "I don't really listen to music lately," she said after a moment. "Too many announcements on trains." He laughed softly. It surprised her how the sound didn't grate. "I get that," he said. "Do you mind if I ask where you're living right now?" The question wiped the trace of warmth from her chest. There it was, the inevitable turn. She picked up her spoon, giving herself a second. "A women's shelter," she said finally. Her voice stayed steady. "That was something." "It's temporary." He nodded. Not the careful, pitying nod she knew too well. Just a nod, like someone acknowledging the name of a street. "Thank you for telling me," he said. That was all. No trite reassurance. "No, you don't look like it." "No, I'd never have guessed." She didn't quite know what to do with that. They talked about safe things afterward. Books she pretended she still had time to read. How he preferred the subway to car services because he liked watching people. He told her he ran a company that works with medicine and community stuff, which meant nothing and everything. His watch and the way the staff looked at him told her the rest. When he asked if she wanted dessert, she shook her head. The meal sat heavy in her stomach, her body not used to so much rich food at once. Outside, cold slapped her cheeks. Snow had started to fall, tiny grains that dusted the pavement like salt. "Can I call a car for you?" Eli asked. "No." She said it too fast, then softer. "No, thanks. I'm fine. There's a subway entrance just down there." He studied her for a moment, like he wanted to argue, then nodded. "Would it be okay if I text you?" he asked. "Only if you want that." She thought of the other women at the shelter, of the way they had nudged her, teasing and hopeful. She thought of the long, blank nights ahead. "Yeah," she said, "that's okay." His smile was small but real. "Good night, Noel." When she walked away, she could feel his gaze on her back, but she didn't look back. The women's shelter was an old brick building 3 subway stops away, squeezed between a laundromat and a Latina grocery store that never seemed to close. Inside, the heat was uneven and the walls thin, laughter and arguments, the buzz of late-night TV shows, the rustle of plastic bags all layered together. Noelle moved through the narrow hallway on autopilot, nodding to faces she knew. "Hey, Cinderella." A woman with purple braids called from a bunk bed. "Did he have all his teeth?" "Most of them," Noelle said. It made a small wave of laughter. That helped. On the top floor, a door led to the roof. Technically, residents weren't supposed to go up there without staff, but the lock had never worked quite right, and some rules bent under the weight of long days. The city air hit her again as she stepped out, colder and cleaner than downstairs. The skyline spread out in front of her, all sharp angles and glowing windows. 1,000 lives stacked on top of one another. Somewhere far above, helicopters blinked against the clouds. Noelle sank down on the concrete step, wrapped her coat tighter, and let the silence wrap around her. Her phone buzzed. "Thank you for tonight. I was really glad to meet you," from Eli. She stared at the words for a long time. "He's just being polite," she told herself. "He feels sorry for you. He wanted an interesting story to tell in some meeting." Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. There were so many possible replies, jokes, deflections, gratitude. In the end, she locked the phone and slid it back into her pocket. The wind lifted a strand of hair and brushed it against her cheek like a question. She didn't have an answer yet. The support group met in a church basement on Wednesdays. Plastic chairs formed a loose circle. A pot of coffee murmured on a folding table in the corner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Noelle sat near the edge of the circle, back straight, hands knotted in her lap. Around her, people shifted in their chairs. An older man with a thick winter coat worn indoors, as if he didn't trust any room to stay warm. A young mother with a stroller pushed behind her chair. A man with tattoos curling up his neck, eyes darting from face to face. At the front, Dr. Myers stood with a clipboard, gray hair pulled back, voice low and even. "As always," they said, "share as much or as little as you want. This is your story. You decide how it's told." When it was her turn, Noelle managed a thin smile. "I'm Noelle," she said. "I volunteer at the shelter in a care home. I still sleep at the shelter, for now." She almost said more while about the night years ago when the rain hammered the city so hard the subway steps became a waterfall. About the boy shivering under the stairwell, too soaked and thin to look up. About taking off her only dry coat and putting it over his shoulders. About the small scrap of paper pressed into his cold fingers, with a sentence scrawled in her hurry, "No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk." But the words lodged in her chest. "I'm okay," she finished instead. "I'm just here." Our Myers nodded. "Here's a good place to start." Later, as the others shared, the story of that night flickered in the back of Noelle's mind like an old, grainy film. She pushed it down. Some memories felt too private to bring into a circle lit by cheap fluorescent bulbs. Afterwards, she helped stack chairs. On the walk back to the shelter, snow crunched underfoot. The city felt too big and too small all at once. The first time she saw Eli again outside the restaurant, he was balancing 3 trays of paper cups and bottled water in his arms. The shelter's common room buzzed with unusual energy. Flyers had gone up the week before about a community night, some kind of partnership with a foundation that supported people transitioning out of homelessness. Noelle had expected nameless staff in branded jackets. She hadn't expected him. He wore jeans and a hoodie instead of a suit. His hair was messier, as if he'd run his hands through it on the way in. Still, he carried himself with the same quiet focus she'd noticed at dinner. "Yo," the older man with the heavy coat said, squinting. "Is that kid no way?" Eli glanced over, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Hey, Owen." Holy Owen barked a laugh. "Look at you. Last time I saw you, you were hustling for spare change at 34th Street. Man." The room shifted. Noelle stared. She watched Eli set down the trays, greet people by name. There was an ease in his movements that didn't fit the caricature of a clean, untouched CEO. Pieces rearranged themselves in her head. The way he'd talked about the subway, the way he'd listened when she mentioned the shelter. He'd been here before, not just for a photo op. From the inside. Later, as he addressed the room talking about job training programs, about housing vouchers, about the foundation that funded nights like this, a hum grew in the back of Noelle's mind. Eli Harper, the man who had taken her to a restaurant she would never afford, had once curled up on a bench somewhere, counting coins to buy a sandwich. He caught her eye across the room. For a moment, it felt like the whole shelter dropped away, leaving just that line of connection stretching between them. He lifted a hand in a small wave. She looked away. heart thudding. In the weeks that followed, Eli became a quiet fixture in the background of Noelle's days. At the nursing home where she worked part-time, he showed up with a group of volunteers, helping wheel residents into the courtyard to feel actual sunlight on their faces. No cameras, no banners. Noelle watched him kneel to retie the loose laces of an old man's shoe. Listen to him ask about a woman's favorite song from when she was young. He never introduced himself there as anything but Eli. I'm here to help. At the shelter, he attended meetings with Rosa, the stern, sharp-eyed woman who ran the place like a mother who had seen too many children thrown out into the cold. They talked about things Noelle only half understood: grant renewals, wait lists for transitional housing. Once, Noelle walked past Rosa's office and heard her say, "I don't want my girls turned into your success stories. They are people, not campaigns." "I know," Eli said quietly. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." The words lodged in Noelle's chest. She began to see him in other places, too, at the support group. The night he walked into the circle, the air changed. He didn't wear the hoodie this time, just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up, no watch. He sat in one of the plastic chairs like everyone else. When it was his turn, he didn't hesitate. "I'm Eli," he said. "I run a company now, and a foundation. But before that, I slept under bridges and in subway cars. I stole food. I lied. I did what I thought I had to do to not disappear." His voice wasn't dramatic. It was almost flat, the way people spoke when the story had sanded itself smooth over the years. "There was a night," he continued, "when it rained so hard, I thought the city might wash me away. I'd been kicked out of a shelter for missing curfew. I was soaked, shaking, convinced I was just background noise." He swallowed, and then someone put a coat over my shoulders. I never saw her face clearly. Just a flash of hair, the smell of cheap shampoo, a hand with bitten nails. She left me a note. It said, "No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk." He smiled, a little sadly. I carried that sentence in my pocket until the paper turned to shreds. He said, "I think, in a way, I've been trying to live up to it ever since." The room was very still. Noelle's heart slammed against her ribs. She could feel the thin paper between her fingers again, the ink smudging as she scribbled the words in the rain. The boy's eyes had been too empty to hold, so she'd focused on his hands, on getting the coat over him, on leaving before she changed her mind. She had forgotten his face long ago. She had never forgotten the note. Now, here he was, a man with an email signature and a seat in boardrooms, telling that story like a compass point. After the meeting, people drifted out in clusters. Noelle lingered near the coffee table, rinsing cups. "You okay?" Rosa asked her quietly, having come to observe tonight's session. Noelle nodded. "Too fast. I'm fine." On the walk out, Eli caught up to her. "Hey," he said. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. "I didn't know you came to this group." "I don't talk much," she said. "I just listen." "Listening is kind of underrated," he said. "Sometimes that's what keeps people alive." They exited the building into the bite of the night. Above them, the city blinked. On the roof of the community center, later, they ended up side by side without planning it, both drawn here by habit. They sat on the low wall, feet dangling over the drop. Street lights smeared gold down the avenue. The wind tugged at her hair. "Do you ever feel like you don't deserve this?" Noelle asked suddenly. She wasn't sure where the question came from. Maybe from the way he had talked earlier. Maybe from the way the city seemed to balance on a knife edge beneath them. "Which this?" he asked softly. "The life, the job being warm." "All of it," she said. "All the time," he answered. She glanced at him. His profile was a study in contrast, the firmness of his jaw, the vulnerability in his eyes. "But," he added after a moment, "I'm starting to think deserve is the wrong word. None of us earned being left out there. Maybe we don't have to earn every second of being allowed back in." The wind carried his words away. They hung between them like visible breath. Noelle looked back at the streets below. For a heartbeat, she imagined what it would be like to believe that. She wasn't there yet. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. It was thicker than the usual letters, with her name typed in clean black ink. She turned it over in her hands 3 times before Rosa, passing by, raised an eyebrow. "You going to open that or frame it?" the older woman asked. Noelle smiled, nerves twisting. Probably just another bill I can't pay. But when she slid a finger under the flap and unfolded the papers, the words blurred for a second before coming into focus. "A full scholarship at nursing." The letter read, "Tuition, fees, supplies, sponsored by the Harbor Light Community Foundation." Her knees went weak. She dropped into a chair. Rosa took the letter from her, scanning it, then looked up sharply. "This is legit," she said. "I've heard of them." "Them," Noelle echoed. "The foundation," Rosa said. "They've been funding a lot of good work in the city, quietly, mostly." She tapped the letter. "This is big, kid." Big felt too small a word. Noelle imagined classrooms, textbooks she wouldn't have to borrow, nights studying that might actually lead somewhere, a license. A job that wasn't just pieced together from whatever shifts were left over on. Her hands trembled. "Why me?" she whispered. Rosa's gaze softened. "Maybe someone finally saw what I've been seeing." The edges of the world shimmered. For a moment, Noelle let herself feel it. The possibility. The way the corridors of the nursing home might look from the vantage point of someone fully qualified. The way she might walk someday without always calculating the nearest place to sleep. Then the familiar voice in her head hissed, "Nothing is free. Nothing is random." A week later, she found herself in a bright office downtown, staring at a wall of glass with the city spread beyond it like a map. She'd come to sign some scholarship paperwork. Eli's assistant, a woman with efficient air and quick hands, shuffled forms in front of her. "We're so excited you're part of this year's cohort," the woman said. "Mr. Harper pushed hard for us to expand the number of recipients." Noelle froze. "Mr. Harper?" "Yes," the assistant said. "Eli, he personally reviewed your application. By the way, I think your essay really moved him." The words fell like pebbles into a deep well inside her. Noelle saw the path backward suddenly. The blind date, the community nights, the support group. The way he'd looked at her when she mentioned wanting to get her nursing license someday, even though it felt like talking about the moon. She remembered the note in her pocket, now transformed into official stationery. "We are pleased to offer you this opportunity." Heat rose to her face. "So this wasn't random," she said quietly. The assistant blinked. "Well, nah, there's a committee. But Harper definitely championed." "Right," Noelle cut in, forcing a smile. "Thank you." On the way out, her reflection in the elevator doors looked like a stranger. A girl from a shelter, dressed in her best thrifted clothes, standing in a tower where decisions were made about people like her as if they were line items on a budget. Suddenly, the scholarship didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like a carefully placed piece in a story someone else was writing about her. It was in Eli's office that she saw the drawing. He'd stepped out to take a call, leaving her to sign one last page. The room was cleaner than she'd expected. No clutter, no mess, just a desk, a couple of chairs, and a framed sketch on the wall behind him. Noelle had seen enough art in hospital hallways to recognize when something had been drawn from memory rather than imagination. A boy curled under the stairs of a subway entrance, knees to his chest. Rain slanted in from the edge of the frame, lines of graphite so dense she could almost hear it. Over the boy's shoulders, a coat draped, slightly too big. The girl who had left it was only a suggestion, the edge of a sleeve, the outline of a hand. Beneath the drawing, in small letters, someone had written, "No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk." Her chest constricted. "That's my favorite piece in here," Eli's voice said softly behind her. She turned. He stood in the doorway, phone back in his pocket, watching her. Someone gave that to me, Walsaz," he said, stepping closer. "A long time ago. I was sure I was nothing. Just one more kid the city would forget. Then this stranger shows up with a coat and that sentence. It was like someone had cracked open a door I didn't even know existed. He smiled, the memory softening his features. I don't know who she was, he said, but I've been trying to make the world slightly less cruel ever since. Feels like I owe her that much. The room swam. Noelle heard her own voice in her head, younger and more certain, thinking she could throw that coat into the storm and walk away unchanged. She had moved on. She hadn't expected the night to follow her. Now it hung on his wall, immortalized in pencil and ink. Whoever she is, Noelle said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her tone. I hope she got something out of that night too. Not just a story on someone else's wall. Pain flickered, quickly masked over his face. You're right, he said. Stories can be stolen. That's not what I want to do. His gaze moved to the scholarship papers still in her hand. I should have told you the foundation was mine. He admitted that I thought it would only make you feel watched or obligated. I didn't want that. But you did it anyway, she said. I did, he said. He didn't look away. Because I believe you'd be an incredible nurse. And the world is better when people like you are in the rooms where decisions are made about care. Her throat closed. You believe that because you've decided I'm one of your projects, she said quietly, like a before and after photo, from sidewalk to success story. Noelle, I don't want to be another painting on your wall, she said. Silence stretched. He exhaled. I hear you, he said softly. Even if I don't know yet how to fix the way this looks. She held his gaze for another heartbeat, then looked past him, out at the city. Somewhere beneath that skyline, the girl she had been stood in the rain, thinking she could throw a coat over someone and then disappear. Neither of them had disappeared. The meeting with the board happened in a room even higher than his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that looked like it had never seen spilled coffee, men and women in expensive clothes, each holding a tablet or a stack of glossy printouts. On the top page, a photo mock-up, a young woman in a nursing uniform, hair neatly pulled back, standing in front of a hospital. Above her, from streets to scrubs, the Harbor Light story. We're sitting on a powerful narrative here. Ms. Clark said, pointing with a lacquered fingernail. A scholarship recipient who went from homeless shelter to nursing school. It's exactly the kind of thing donors eat up. She's not a meal, Eli said. He hadn't meant to let the words come out that raw. Relax, Clark replied, unbothered. We're not exploiting her. We're highlighting her courage, her resilience, and we've already spoken with comms. They can frame this beautifully. We'll do a mini documentary, some interviews, maybe even a short segment on morning TV. And if she doesn't want that, Eli asked, why wouldn't she? Clark blinked. We're paying for her future. A little backstory in exchange for a fully funded education seems fair. The word made his skin crawl. She hasn't agreed to this, he said. And until she does, we don't plan campaigns around her life. Clark's eyes cooled. This is bigger than one girl. Eli, the more money we raise, the more programs we can run. You know that. We can't be squeamish about using emotional leverage. He thought of the plastic chairs in the basement, the man with tattoos trying to string together a sentence about shame, the woman with the stroller, eyes hollow with exhaustion. He thought of Noelle, staring at the sketch on his office wall like it was something that might bite. Emotional leverage, he repeated. Yes, Clark said briskly. Stories, faces, people we've helped. That's what donors expect. He felt something settle in his chest, heavy and hard. Then we need to change what donors expect, he said. Her lips thinned. You're letting your personal feelings interfere. Again. By the time Noelle got the email laying out the opportunities of sharing her journey, the words on the screen felt familiar in a way that made her sick. You could inspire so many people. Your courage could help others get the support they need. We believe your story deserves to be told on a bigger stage. Her hands shook. She went to Rosa's office, letter in hand. They want interviews, Noelle said. Photos, filming in the shelter, talking about everything, like I'm a movie trailer for their generosity. Rose's jaw clenched. I told him this would happen if he let them smell blood, she muttered, more to herself than to Noel. Then, looking up, softer, what do you want? What? Noel stared at the letter. I want the degree, she whispered. I want to work and not count train stops by which ones are safe to sleep on. I want to walk into a pharmacy and not calculate which bandages I can't afford. And Rosa prompted, and I don't want to stand in front of a camera and turn the worst years of my life into something inspirational. Noel said, I don't want every person who finds out to look at me like I'm either a miracle or a cautionary tale. Rosa leaned back, eyes searching her face. Then you know what to write, she said. That night, in her narrow bed, the shelter's noises muffled by the thin curtain around her bunk, Noel took out a pen. The words came slowly at first, then faster, as if a dam had cracked. She wrote about what it felt like to watch people fall asleep, sitting up because there weren't enough beds. About listening to men in suits talk about the homeless problem as though it were a weather pattern. She wrote about the note she'd written in the rain years before, and how she'd meant it as much for herself as for the boy under the stairs. I am grateful for the scholarship. She wrote, I will work harder than you can imagine, but I will not sell my pain to pay it back. I will not strip myself naked emotionally in front of donors so they can feel warm inside their skin. If that is the condition, then I decline. I would rather work night shifts forever than turn my life into your marketing. She signed her name, then hesitated. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, she added another line. No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk, and no one should have to undress their scars to earn a bed. Eli read the letter in his office with the door closed. Each sentence hit like a blow he both deserved and needed. By the time he reached the last line, his eyes stung. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. The board meeting that week crackled with the usual numbers and projections until he set the letter down in the middle of the polished table. What's this? Clark asked. Her answer, Mom. Yes, he said. He read it aloud. The room slowly fell silent. That's dramatic, one board member said finally. It's true, Eli replied. It's emotional, Clark corrected. Truth is a matter of perspective. She doesn't understand the scale we're dealing with here. She understands more than we do, Eli said, because she's the one whose life we're trying to package. You're blowing this out of proportion, Clark snapped. One subject says no. Fine, we find another. That's the problem, he said. You say subject, story. You don't say person. A muscle ticked in her jaw. What are you suggesting, she asked. That we never show the impact of our work, that we hide success because it makes you uncomfortable. I'm suggesting we stop confusing impact with ownership, he said. Helping someone doesn't give us the right to decide how or if their story is told. And if donors walk, another member asked sharply, if programs get cut, if shelters close, will you tell the people sleeping on the street that at least their dignity stayed intact? The question sliced through him. He thought of Owen's rough laugh, of the woman with the stroller, of Noel on the roof, face turned toward a city that had given her so little and asked so much. He thought of the boy he'd been, clutching a soggy slip of paper in his fist. He straightened. If the only way we can fund help is by turning people into commodities, he said quietly, then we are not the solution we think we are. We're just a more polite version of the problem. Clark's eyes turned cold. Then maybe you're not the leader we need right now, she said. Maybe I'm not, he agreed. He placed his resignation on the table. Later, packing his office into boxes, Eli found himself digging through an old file crate from the early days of the foundation. Clippings, notes from community meetings, photocopies of articles about housing policy. At the bottom lay a yellowed page, cut from a local paper that had since folded. The title read, We Are Not Your Inspiration. The letter below, unsigned except for a single initial, was a sharp and eloquent indictment of how stories about resilient homeless individuals made everyone feel better without changing the structures that kept people on the street. He'd read it years ago, late at night in a one-room apartment he barely afforded, the words burning into him. He'd started Harbor Light after that, determined to do better. Now, rereading, his breath caught. The rhythm of the sentences, the way anger braided itself with hope, the specific phrase, "We are not here to redeem your guilt." It echoed the cadences of Noel's letter in his pocket. He laid the 2 pages side by side, old ink and new. The resemblance was not perfect. People changed, voices matured, but something in the bones of the language felt the same. And the old letter had been signed. Just that. He imagined a younger Noel, hunched over a library computer, fingers flying, heart pounding as she wrote into the void, not sure anyone would ever read it. He had read it and had built a whole institution in response. Now, that institution was splintering because he'd failed to follow the very principles that had lit it. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the path ahead was blurry but present. He could walk away from the boardroom. He could sell part of his stake, funnel resources into a leaner foundation that operated on different rules. He could choose, again and again, to listen to the people he claimed to serve. He could, perhaps, learn to see Noelle not as a symbol, but as exactly what she was: a woman who had given him more than she knew, who owed him nothing. Months blurred. The city's winter gave way to a tentative spring. Snowmelt turned to rain, then to the muggy heat of early summer. Noelle moved into a small, shared apartment near the nursing school. The rent was cheap because the building moaned at night, and the plumbing made decisions of its own. But it was hers. Her name on the lease. Her key. She kept the scholarship. Not the PR campaign. Not the cameras. Just the classes. The textbooks. The slow, sweaty learning of anatomy charts and medication dosages. After Eli's resignation, Harbor Light had looked like it might fold. Then, unexpectedly, small donations began to pour in. $10 here, $20 there, accompanied by notes from people who said things like, "Thank you for listening to her. Thank you for stepping down instead of selling her out. Thank you for remembering we are not your stories." And the foundation shrank but did not die. It reappeared as a quieter, humbler presence, focusing on grants and advocacy instead of glossy narratives. Eli didn't have an office in the glass tower anymore. He worked out of a cramped space above a laundromat, the hum of washing machines underlining his days. He spent more time in church basements and city council meetings, less in boardrooms. Noelle saw his name occasionally in emails, on small announcements about policy pushes and microgrants to shelters she knew. She heard Owen mention him once at the shelter, tone grudgingly respectful. He messed up. Owen said bygone, but then he didn't double down. That's rare. Noelle didn't seek him out. She didn't know what she would say if she did. Her world narrowed to lectures, clinical rotations, late nights at the nursing home. She learned how to insert IV lines with steady hands, how to talk to families when the news wasn't good, how to stay upright on 3 hours of sleep and determination. Sometimes, on her way home, she'd pass the subway entrance where she'd given away her coat years before. The stairs still glistened in the rain. A different boy sat there now. Sometimes she'd give him a coffee. Sometimes she'd leave nothing but a look that said, "I see you." She kept the sentence from her note inside her, a quiet litany. No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk. No one. The ceremony at the nursing home took place on a bright afternoon that smelled of overwatered ficus plants and institutional floor polish. A banner stretched across the rec room, Appreciation Day for nurses and care staff. Residents sat in rows, some in wheelchairs, some on folding chairs, dressed in their finest sweaters. Staff lined the sides of the room, uniforms pressed, hair neatly tied back. Noelle stood near the back, fingers fussing with the edge of her badge. She felt strange in the clean white of her uniform, still half expecting someone to tap her on the shoulder and tell her she didn't belong here. "Don't fidget," Rosa murmured beside her. The older woman had been invited as a community partner. "You look like you're about to bolt." "I always look like I'm about to bolt," Noelle said under her breath. Rosa's lips twitched. Maybe less these days. At the front of the room, the director of the facility tapped the microphone. "Today," she said, "we also have a guest from Harbor Light Foundation, which has been supporting our staff wellness program. Please welcome Eli Harper." The name thudded in Noelle's ears. He stepped up to the microphone. The same man and not the same at all. No suit, just a shirt with rolled sleeves and a tie that looked like it had been knotted in a hurry. His hair was a little longer, his face a little more lined. The shine of polished wealth had faded, replaced by something quieter. He scanned the room. For a heartbeat, his gaze snagged on her. Surprise flickered there, then steadied into something warmer. "Hi," he said into the mic, voice slightly amplified and a little awkward. "I'm Eli. Some of you know Harbor Light from various programs, but today, I'm mostly here to say thank you." He looked at the staff on either side. "My life was changed by people like you," he said simply. People who did the invisible work of keeping other human beings alive and dignified, often without anyone clapping. So consider this, he gestured at the banner. The trays of cookies, the lukewarm punch, a very small attempt to clap. Soft laughter rippled. He smiled, then grew serious again. "Years ago," he continued, "I was sleeping wherever I could. Subway stations, park benches. I was starting to believe that was the only story I would ever live." He hesitated. "And then someone put a coat over my shoulders in the rain," he said. "They left me a note that said, 'No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk,'" and the room blurred at the edges for Noelle. She hadn't known he would say those words today. She hadn't expected to hear them spoken into a microphone, carried out over this room full of people who had no idea what they meant to her. Eli's gaze moved over to the crowd, searching for something he might not even know he was looking for. He cleared his throat. "I built a lot of my life around that sentence," he said, "around trying to make it less likely that someone would have to feel what I felt that night." He paused, then added, "Recently, someone reminded me that there's another half to it." Silence settled, expectant. He looked down at his notes, then back up again. "No one is born to sleep on a sidewalk," he repeated, voice steady. Words rose in Noelle's chest like they'd been waiting there for years. "And no one should have to undress their scars to earn a bed," she said, the words leaving her before she could stop them. They weren't loud, but in the sudden hush, they carried. Heads turned. A few staff members glanced back, curious. Eli's eyes found her. Recognition crashed through his expression, slow and powerful. The coat in the rain, the anonymous letter, the scholarship letter, the words in his pocket. The woman in the shelter's worn coat, standing in this room in a nurse's uniform. All the threads he'd been pulling at for years knotted together. Of course it was her. Of course it had always been her. The microphone picked up his exhale. "Yeah," he said softly, a small, amazed smile touching his mouth. "Exactly that." He finished the speech, talking about grants and wellness rooms and the importance of rest. Noelle heard the words like they were coming from underwater. Afterward, as residents were wheeled out and plates of cookies were passed around, she tried to slip toward the side door. She didn't make it. "Noelle," Rosa said behind her, not bothering to hide the knowing in her tone. "Someone's looking for you," and Noelle turned. Eli stood a few feet away, a small bouquet of lavender in his hand, stems wrapped in simple brown paper. No ribbons, no glitter. Just the sharp, clean scent of something that grew close to the ground and still found a way to smell like hope. He stopped in front of her. Up close, the changes in him were more obvious. The slight dark under his eyes, the way his shoulders seemed both heavier and freer. "For the record," he said quietly, "I didn't know it was you when I started all of this." "I know," she said. "For the record, I didn't write that note expecting you to build a foundation." Well, they both almost smiled. "For a long time," he said, fingers tightening on the bouquet, "I thought I owed everything to the girl from that night, to the anonymous letter, to a symbol." He shook his head slightly. "I was wrong," he said. "I don't owe a symbol. I owe a person. And I can't pay that debt. Not really. But I can stop turning her into a story that makes me look good." Her throat tightened. "I never asked you to pay anything," she said. "I know," he said. "That's part of what makes it real." He glanced down at the lavender, then back at her. "I don't have a grand gesture," he said. "I'm not here to sweep you off your feet or offer you a mansion. I don't even have an office with a view anymore. Something like laughter flickered in her chest. What I do have, he continued, is this one question. He took a breath. If you want, he said slowly, we could try to build a life where neither of us has to keep proving we deserve to be in the room, where you're not my project, and I'm not your redemption. Just two people who know what it's like out there, trying to do a little better in here, together. The room buzzed around them with conversations and clinking dishes. Nurses laughed. Residents called out to aides. Somewhere, a television played a muted game show. Noelle looked at him, then she looked past him, through the rec room's window, at the city she had both loved and hated. The streets where she had walked off nights of hunger. The shelter that had held her when she had nowhere else to go. She thought of the girl in the rain, stubborn and scared and still willing to give away her only coat. She thought of the woman she was now, standing upright in a uniform she had earned with bone-deep exhaustion and quiet pride. Her future was still uncertain. The world was still unfair. But here, in this sliver of afternoon light, a door stood open. She reached out and took the lavender from his hand. Okay, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. Let's see what we can build, without turning it into a commercial. His laugh was soft and unsteady, like someone exhaling after holding their breath for a very long time. Deal, he said. They walked out of the rec room side by side, the scent of lavender trailing after them, folding into the larger smell of the city exhaust and rain and hot concrete and the faint, stubborn sweetness of things that refused to stop growing in the cracks.